He refused to ride away, a Wyoming frontier saga. The cry across Red Butte Valley. The sound tore through the Wyoming air like metal scraping bone. Caleb Turner felt it before you recognized it. It wasn't the wind combing the tall sagebrush. It wasn't a hawk's shrill call slicing the sky. It wasn't the distant rumble of cattle shifting across the flats. It was human. And it carried a kind of fear that did not belong in daylight. Caleb tightened the reins, and his horse halted at the crest of a red clay ridge overlooking Red Butte Valley. August heat shimmered above the plains. The horizon wavered in gold and white haze. For 7 years, Caleb had lived alone on his spread outside Bitter Hollow. 7 years since influenza had taken his wife Mara. 7 years since it carried off his boy Jonah 3 days later. 7 years of quiet meals, quiet mornings, quiet grief. He had told himself solitude was safer than hope. But that cry did not allow distance. He turned his gelding toward the sound. The broken wagon. In a shallow wash below, a wagon lay canted against a boulder. One wheel was splintered. Supplies littered the dirt, flour torn open, blankets half buried in dust, a water barrel drained and dry. And near the wagon stood a child. A little girl, maybe 5, straw-colored hair tangled and clinging to her cheeks. Her small boots planted wide. In her hand she gripped a stick as if it were a rifle. On the ground behind her lay a woman, unmoving in the glare of the sun. The girl was holding the stick awkwardly above the woman's face, trying to cast shade. Caleb slid from his saddle before the horse had fully stopped. The girl turned sharply. "Don't come closer," she shouted, voice breaking. Caleb raised both hands slowly. "I won't hurt you." "That's what they said," she whispered. The words landed heavy. He had seen what they left behind before. The child named Clara. "How long have you been here?" he asked gently. The girl blinked against the sun. "I don't know. It's hot." Her lips were cracked. Her knees trembled. "What's your name?" "Clara." "And her?" "My mama, Ruth." Caleb knelt beside the woman. Her skin burned with fever. A wound cut along her upper arm, bandaged badly. "How long since you woke?" "Yesterday morning. She told me not to leave." "You did right," Caleb said quietly. He poured water from his canteen to Ruth's lips. Some spilled. Some went in. No response. "We need shade," he said. "My ranch is 5 miles." Clara searched his face for a long moment. Then she nodded once. The ride home, Caleb secured Ruth carefully across the saddle and lifted Clara behind him. She clutched his vest tight. He had not felt small arms around him since Jonah, memory stabbed. But he did not allow it to linger. The ride stretched long under brutal heat. When his cabin finally came into view, relief hit him like rain on droughted land. He carried Ruth inside and laid her on his own bed. Clara followed so close, she nearly stepped on his boots. They worked together in silence. He cleaned the wound, boiled water, applied salve, changed dressings. Clara hauled buckets from the well without complaint. By evening, the fever began to ease. "She's fighting," Caleb told the girl. Clara sank against the wall, exhausted. He handed her bread and smoked beef. "Will she die?" she asked. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But she's stronger than she was." Clara nodded and kept chewing. That night, the cabin did not feel empty. It felt full. The shadow from back east. Ruth woke near midnight. Her eyes scanned the unfamiliar ceiling in alarm. "Clara?" "She's here," Caleb said softly. "Safe." Relief washed over her features. Later, when Clara slept, Ruth spoke. "They weren't random," she said. "Who?" Caleb asked. "The men." She hesitated. "My father." Caleb stilled. "Elias Whitcomb." The name was known even in Wyoming. Railroads. Timber. Shipping contracts from Chicago to New York. "He wanted you back?" Caleb asked. "He wanted Clara." "For what?" "For control." She explained slowly. Her late husband had left Clara beneficiary to a sizable estate. Whoever had legal guardianship would oversee the funds. "My father doesn't lose," Ruth said. Caleb stared at the oil lamp flame. "He will come," she added. "Let him," Caleb replied quietly. The lawyer arrives. 3 days later, a well-dressed rider appeared. Silas Kent, attorney for Elias Whitcomb. He delivered formal papers. Custody petition. Hearing scheduled in Laramie. You have 1 week, Kent said smoothly. Clara hid behind Ruth's skirts. Caleb stepped forward. If Whitcomb wants the girl, he said calmly, he can ask in person. Kent's smile thinned. He may do exactly that. A marriage for protection. That night the cabin was quiet. Ruth sat at the table. Judges like stability, she said softly. Caleb understood. You mean marriage? Yes, for Clara. He stared at the wooden grain of the table. I swore I'd never. She did not push. He looked toward the loft where Clara slept. I won't let him take her. Even knowing about the money? I don't care about money. Silence stretched. All right, Ruth whispered. The wedding at Bitter Hollow. They married 3 days later in the small chapel near Bitter Hollow. Reverend Hale officiated. Clara held wildflowers tied with twine. No music, no celebration. Just vows spoken clearly. Afterward, Clara looked up at him. Does this mean I can call you PA? The question hit deep. If you want. She nodded solemnly. Okay, PA. Something inside him shifted. Court in Laramie. The courtroom buzzed. Elias Whitcomb sat immaculate in tailored black. He looked less villain and more institution. His lawyer spoke of opportunity, education, security. Caleb's attorney, a former cavalry officer named Grant Holloway, rose next. Security without love is confinement, he said evenly. Ruth testified to hired men and threats. Then Clara was called. Where do you want to live? The judge asked gently. Clara's small fingers tightened around the stand. With my mama and my PA. The courtroom stilled. Judge Harlan removed his spectacles slowly. Custody remains with the mother and stepfather. Whitcomb's jaw hardened. This is not over, he said quietly. The gavel struck. It is in this court. The kidnapping. 3 nights later, Clara's bed was empty. A note lay in its place. You mistake influence for surrender. Ruth went pale but did not collapse. Caleb's voice turned to iron. Saddle up. The hotel confrontation. Whitcomb was staying at the Grand Continental in Laramie. Caleb created noise in the lobby. Ruth slipped upstairs. Room 302. Clara sat on the bed, eyes swollen from crying. Ruth gathered her quickly. Whitcomb stood in the hallway. You always did choose poorly, he said coldly. You mistake control for love, Ruth replied. He stepped aside. Caleb fought 2 hired guards below. They escaped into the night. A bullet grazed Caleb's side. But he did not fall. Final judgment. The next morning in court, new evidence was presented. Witnesses. Telegrams. Paid writers traced back to Whitcomb's accounts. Judge Harlan did not hesitate. Elias Whitcomb is remanded for investigation into coercion and conspiracy. Whitcomb's composure cracked. Clara ran into Caleb's arms. Can we go home now? Yes, he said softly. 1 year later, the ranch grew. New fencing, fresh paint, glass windows instead of oiled cloth. Clara turned 6. She still woke from bad dreams sometimes, but laughter came easier now. On the anniversary of the scream, Caleb rode to the ridge where it all began. Grass had grown back. No wagon, no dust, no fear. Only wind. From below, Clara's voice drifted upward. PA, supper. He smiled. He turned his horse home. Ruth stood in the doorway, one hand resting over the gentle swell of her stomach. 5 months along, new life coming. Inside the cabin, lamplight burned warm against the Wyoming dusk. For years, Caleb had feared the darkness inside himself. He had thought grief made him dangerous. But he learned something different. Darkness, guided by love, becomes protection. He had saved a woman and her child. And in doing so, they had saved him. And this time, he would never ride past the cry. If this story moved you, please like the video. Share it with someone who loves powerful Western frontier dramas. And subscribe for more epic emotional U.S. Wild West love story.